Dr. Fred Moss felt disillusioned with the conventional approaches to mental health, particularly the over-reliance on medication. This sense of hopelessness fueled his determination to find alternative ways to help people, and it ultimately led to the creation of his unique approach to mental health and well-being. Today, Dr. Moss is going to share the importance of finding and expressing one's true voice, the challenges of overcoming mental health stigmas, and the power of creativity as a healing tool.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
Dr. Fred Moss is a mental health advocate, psychiatrist, keynote speaker, podcaster, and life optimization coach with over 3 decades of experience as an expert witness in psychiatry. He has worked with over 40,000 patients, to help others find balance and peace. He was compelled to challenge the status quo, I love that, and embrace a more holistic and humanistic approach to mental health. You do not want to miss Dr. Moss today. Welcome, Dr. Fred Moss.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on your show. I can't wait for our conversation. Beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. This is just going to be so interesting. I'm very, very anxious to hear what you're going to share. So just share a little bit, whatever you would like initially, about yourself and whatever brought you to the place of changing your practice, I'm assuming, to what you are doing now.
Well, it's interesting. I really didn't change my practice to what I'm doing now. I kind of came out with the same idea. When I first started, this is what I had in mind. So in some ways, I've adjusted back to my core self, not changing my practice from somehow being out there somewhere and then coming on back. I was here to begin with, and then I was sort of dragged out there and then brought myself back. Here's what I mean. I was a born healer. When I arrived, I had 2 older brothers, 10 and 14 years older than me, so adolescent, angry brothers, fighting with my parents, and, I was brought there to bring joy, peace, and, some sort of cohesion to a family in chaos and disarray. And apparently I did a pretty good job for a few years. I think my brothers would not say that I did a great job for all of my life, but at least for a couple years I did pretty good. I was a rolling bundle of joy, and I kept everybody happy, and I brought smiles to faces, and I was smart and precocious and fun, and this is when I look at old pictures of me, I can see all that. But the thing from inside that was really interesting to me is I was so enchanted with this whole idea of communication. I remember being in my playpen and really watching my brothers speak to my parents and really thinking, one day when I get to be a big boy, I'll be able to do that kind of stuff too. And I thought that naturally would be what school would have taught me. And by the time I went to school, in kindergarten, I already knew I knew a lot of things that most of my friends didn't know because I had these 2 brothers, and they were serving me up to, I knew how to read, I knew how to do simple math, I knew how to write cursive, I knew how to do things, and most of my peers didn't know anything about that stuff or about I even knew a little bit about sex, drugs, and rock and roll when I came in because of having my brothers. And I really expected that they would show me how to speak and how to listen, and they did not. It's not what school is about. And no surprise to most people that open discourse is not what's encouraged in a general conventional school setting. Nevertheless, Fred talked a lot. I talked a lot in elementary school because I was kind of bored and I was funny. I was I was curious. I liked making people laugh. I liked talking out of turn. There was no elementary school teacher that I ever had who forgot having Fred as a student. Pretty positive about that. And I just was interested in learning how to communicate. I was always a little bit surprised when they would tell me to be quiet and sit down and sit still and all that. I'd be like, well, what are we doing? Why do you want me to do that? Aren't we supposed to be learning? And as time went on, I was thinking, well, these kids, my brothers and the older kids, they must have learned how to speak somewhere and how to communicate somewhere. So maybe it was like in the later grades. And so junior high and high school only got worse. And I was like, well, all I have to do apparently is just regurgitate what a teacher says and I get to pass with flying colors. That's not open discourse. So I learned how to do that, but it was against my better judgment. And, by the time it came time for making a decision of what to do with my adult life, I decided to go to college. And I went to college, 40 miles away at the University of Michigan. And I started there as an engineer in the engineering school, not even knowing what an engineer was, but I had very good math scores. And so I knew I could get into the university if I applied to engineering school. That's how I did it. And I eventually learned that engineering was not going to be, what floated my boat, that I didn't like the school very much, and it was time to drop out. So I dropped out because it didn't seem like I was learning how to communicate, which is all I really wanted to do. I got on a bus and went across the country to Berkeley so that I would know what my life was about. I took on a Greyhound and went 3,000 miles to Berkeley and, spent the summer in Berkeley. And I did learn a lot about me, but it was not sustainable either. And I got a call from my parents that I remember distinctly when they said that there was this new industry that was coming out that they had read about that looks like the future and that I would probably be very good at it. And so they wanted me to consider going back to school. You might have heard of this industry. It's called computers. And it was like, oh, yeah, I could see where I might be able to do something in the community. I had that kind of aptitude. So, the only computer that even existed at in Michigan, in the state of Michigan, was at the University of Michigan. It was a big 2-acre facility called the computer, building. And punch cards and batch jobs and the whole thing. I was back doing it the second time in college and eventually fairly quickly learned that wasn't going to be me either. So I had to drop out again. I dropped out of college a second time and told my family I was never going back to school for any reason. Then I got a job. My mom's like, well, yeah, that's okay, but you got to get a job. So she got me an application for a job, a civil service job. And this is where my mental health career actually began. So when I say 45 years ago, that's what I mean. January 5th, 1980 is when I started that job. And that was as a child care worker at a state hospital for adolescent boys. And my job there, finally, was indeed to communicate. And that's what it was here. It was like, wow, this is so cool. All I have to do is communicate with these kids. They're not even kids, right? They're like 6 years younger than me or something. And if I communicate with them, I can make a difference and I can get paid while doing so. It's kind of cool. That's what I began to do, is be a child care worker and really enjoy communication again and really get my first access to, remunerative communication, let's say. And sure enough, I liked that job. I worked for a while at that job and eventually decided that I didn't like the way psychiatry was going because I could see the direction it was going. It was, the psychiatrist would be called when we had trouble with a child. Maybe he was up too late or he was in a little tussle with one of his peers or something. We'd call the psychiatrist. He'd come down, talk to the child for like 3 seconds, talk to us for like 7 seconds, and then go to the nursing office and write some order, and then we'd have to go retrieve the child and jam them full of some injectable cocktail of antipsychotics and anti-anxiety agents. And if he stayed in a stupor for the whole day, would call that a success story. And I just could not, I could not, and by the way, that's happening every day still.
Yeah.
That hasn't slowed down. That's happening in the United States, it's happening in Canada, it's happening all over. And it's happened many times, hundreds of times already this morning. So don't fool yourself into thinking that those were the old days or something. Not at all. That's still going on. I saw that. I said I couldn't deal with that and I needed to make a difference. And so I was going to go back to school and learn how to be a psychiatrist who didn't do that. So you can hear, you see that I never really was out there. I didn't have to rein in my practice. This is how the whole thing started. So I wanted to be a communicating psychiatrist, and it seemed like those, those things were becoming extinct. And here I was, I knew that there was power in communication because I've watched, because I'm human. That's why, because when we communicate, that's when things happen. That's when we fall in love. That's when we find our partners. That's when we, change the world. That's when we solve problems. That we need to communicate. I went back to school a third time. While I was still working full-time, I finished my undergraduate degree and then applied to medical school. Unfortunately, got accepted at a beautiful medical school in downtown Chicago, Illinois, Northwestern, and went there with the whole first intention of wanting to be a psychiatrist when I got out. But I went through all the medical school, challenges and all the medical school obligations and responsibilities, and sure enough, came out as a psychiatrist and then did my residency and my fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry. And now I was off to the races. But, by the time I got out, the things had changed considerably. There had been a paradigm shift, right? Like in 1987, Prozac was introduced to the world. And Prozac was a game changer, to say the very least. We've had some game changers recently. Prozac would have ranked with those game changers. Like it was a big deal. Prozac was on the cover of Newsweek all by itself. It was on the cover of Time magazine all by itself. Just a picture of the capsule. And we knew that it was going to be something big because there was a new philosophy that if you were feeling uncomfortable, that meant that there was something wrong with you. So we didn't used to think that. We used to think that if you were feeling uncomfortable, there was some information there you could learn from.
Interesting.
But in 87, that shifted. If you were feeling sad, if you were feeling scared, if you were feeling nervous, if you were feeling distracted, if you were feeling awkward, that meant that you had a condition. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. This is a tough world. This is a very tough world. It is challenging to be alive. It's been challenging to be a human being on this planet since as far back as time goes. There has never been a society or a single person who talked about life being easy. Never. Never. Because it isn't. And that's why. It just isn't. Several billion people later, nobody has ever had an easy life. Like, that's really interesting to know. And so we aim for easy. We aim for smooth. We aim for good. And we sort of set aside what's going on when we're uncomfortable as if there's something wrong with us. For me, that's like burning a log. That's like blaming a log for burning in a fire. It's a fire out here. It's challenging. It's difficult being a human. It's difficult loving people. It's difficult holding your own. It's difficult expressing yourself. It's difficult just, seeing everything that's going on and tolerating it or choosing where to put your energy. So depression and anxiety are just examples of a proper response to a very difficult world. And I think that Krishnamurti says it's no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And that's a very good point. I really just kept on going. And, by this time that I got released from my fellowship, we had already been typecast. Psychiatrists had already been typecast as the diagnosers and the medicators, two things that I couldn't stand doing, but there I was. And, now there's sunk costs because I've, put in 26 years of school. And,
wow.
It's time for me to either come out and do what I was trained to do or, pick a new profession. So I decided to stay in and continue to, be a stand for communication. Sooner or later, that became a revolutionary stand. What the heck? All I'm doing is saying communicate. That's not news to anybody, but it sounds like it's revolutionary. I'm on hundreds of podcasts as a guest because I say that. That's like saying breathe.
Right. Right.
It's like saying, if you want to live, breathe. Oh, listen to how radical that man is. It's like, no, it's not that radical, ultimately. If we want to live a good life, the way that we do it, where does healing take place? Healing takes place in the face of communication and connection, right? Have you ever had it when you were feeling a certain way or saying a certain thing, and then someone came around and you actually knew that they understood and they related and they harmonically resonated with what it is that you were thinking or saying? It's like an extraordinary experience of healing for everyone involved. There is no medicine and no diagnosis in the mental health world that even holds a candle to that level of healing that takes place when we connect with another human. So I became a big stand for that, and it became more and more clear as my years went on. And in 2006, I began to do something a little bit different. I took a big group of my couple thousand patients off of medicine altogether.
Really?
I know, doesn't that sound radical? But listen to how weird that is, that even that's radical.
Yeah,
it's
no kidding.
There's nothing radical about coming off of medicine. Not inherently. Do you see what I'm saying? People are like,
Absolutely.
That's wild. You took people off medicine? It's like, that is so backwards. People should be shocked that I'm giving people some toxic laboratory drug to affect the way that they think in a positive direction. It's like, that's shocking. Taking people off that stuff shouldn't be shocking. But I'm telling you, when I tell people I did that in 2006, people are, oh, so much courage. Or, it's like, no, just sensibility. These people were not doing as well as they thought they were doing. And sure enough, when I took them off their medicine, they got better, way better. Their symptoms improved. In fact, their symptoms often disappeared all entirely, that they no longer had the conditions that they came there for in the first place. So I began to really see that these medicines actually induce, increase, perpetuate, or maybe even cause the symptoms they're marketed to treat, and that became very clear to me.
Okay.
Because when people have conditions and they take medicine, you take them off their medicine, they get better. It's like really interesting. Now, they might have to go through a little bit of a difficult run, and we can talk about that, but here's this thing that's really more important. Well, number one, there's a disclaimer here. So you probably have some people who are listening to this podcast who are pretty sure that they're on the right medicine, they have the right diagnosis, they got the right treatment plan, they love their therapist, and they wouldn't trade it for the world. And to those people, I say absolutely, keep doing what you're doing. More power to you, good for you. If you come to a place in your life where you're pretty sure you wouldn't trade it for anything, well, then you have come to a magical place in life, and you deserve to continue to have that life. And I really mean that. I don't mean that in a problem way, right? Anywhere in life, if you get to the place where you wouldn't trade where you are for the world, right? Please keep doing that. That's a magical state. I'm actually speaking to the hundreds of millions of people out there who are pretty sure that they're undertreated, mistreated, overtreated, underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, overdiagnosed. And there are hundreds of millions of people who fall into that category. And that's where this conversation is really aimed at. So I'm not asking people to come off medicine if they in fact are quite certain that it's helping it from here, helping at a level that they wouldn't trade. It's very important. So when we start looking at, well, what is the real deal here? The real deal, when you look at it, in 2006, when I started taking people off and they got better, I wanted to scream that from the mountaintops.
No kidding.
But I later learned that people, that screaming things violently doesn't really get your point across. So I had to change. I had to find a more gentle way to actually express and, maybe make a difference. And so I look, where is it that we can make a difference in this cycle? And as it turns out, the difference, I don't blame medicine. It's not like there's something called Big Pharma. I tried to call Big Pharma the other day. I couldn't find the number. Do you have the number for Big Pharma? I don't think you do. Because it's not a real deal. You see, it's just that there's nothing there. There's no accountability when you call it Big Pharma. And so, or insurance companies. I wanted to call insurance companies the other day, and I couldn't find their number. You can help me out with that? Like, I wanted to let them know. Or physicians, doctors. It's like, how can I make a difference? And really what I learned was the difference that needs to be made is with people are not forced to take medicine. people come to a psychiatrist to confirm that there's something wrong with them. They do not come to a psychiatrist to find out if there's something wrong with them. In fact, psychiatry is really interesting this way because it might be the only subspecialty where if you tell the patient that they're okay, they actually get pissed. It's like, what is that?
Wow.
So people really want to know that there's something wrong with them. Why? Well, for the most part, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, I mean it in a human way, it's in order to relinquish responsibility for the parts of our life that aren't going as well as we wished. So, if I yell at my kids or yell at my wife or I, late to work or I can't get this stuff done or I, feel confused or I feel sad or feel angry or scared, I can say, well, that isn't me, that's my ADHD. That isn't me, that's my PTSD. That isn't me, that's my Asperger's spectrum. That isn't me, that's my, bipolar disorder, whatever. And so people are able to fall back on their condition and, actually take on the thing that they think they have, that someone has told them they have, that they feel they've confirmed, and then they become that condition, right? And so, and by becoming that condition, they then get to sort of write off their experiences in life. And like, well, if I didn't have ADHD, then I would have completed my work on time. Or if I didn't have bipolar disorder, I wouldn't have got so angry so fast. Well, maybe. Or maybe there's really another way to look at this whole thing, which is there might be nothing wrong with you in the first place. So that's the philosophy that actually runs with Welcome to Humanity, is that there might be nothing wrong with you in the first place as a way to look at this. You see, when we get that we are just logs burning in a fire, then we don't have to be upset for us being uncomfortable. We can be no one wants being uncomfortable, right? I'm not saying deal with it. I'm saying find ways to comfort for sure. And there are already many, many cool ways to find, to manage misery or to manage discomfort or unpleasantness of life. None of that require a diagnosis or any medications to get it done. Like there are age-old ways to take on feeling uncomfortable in this crazy world. And this is not the craziest of all times, by the way. We think it is. We think this is the craziest of all time, but every culture has thought that they were living in the craziest of all time. So if we really want to look at this thing directly, we start seeing that since communication is at the heart of all healing, and diagnoses and medications tend to turn people into doing things a little bit worse than they were doing ultimately, then we can change the paradigm and change the philosophy. And that's where my books and Welcome to Humanity come in. I started traveling around the world, all over the country. I was a traveling doc. That's how I got those big numbers. And then also all over the world. I did remote psychiatry from multiple countries, including Thailand and Bhutan and Nepal and Israel, France, Italy, England. Really just looking for, well, what is the universal truth about humanity? One thing that's very clearly true about humanity, I found, which is, not to be too redundant, is that humans love to be connected with. Human beings are interested in the human connection. So I learned that was going on in every country, everywhere, no matter the age group or circumstances or conditions of anybody's lifestyle. And when I learned that, it became really clear that I'm onto a good thing here, that really helping people and creating the space for people to find their true voice so that they can communicate. You see, if you're not going to speak your voice, no one will ever hear you. And if you're not going to speak your true voice, no one will ever know you. So that is, if you're pretending to be somebody that you're not in order to protect the person that you are, you're obscuring the possibility for an honest-to-goodness connection. Because you're not even presenting who you really are, so whoever they're connecting with, if they're trying to connect, isn't really you in the first place. So I invite people to really find their true voice by moving the things out of their way that are in their way of finding it. That's what the True Voice course is about. That's what the True Voice book is about. There was a book that I wrote called Find Your True Voice. Shocking title, right? And that book is available for free. You can find it at at either of my websites or at findyourtruevoicebook.com. You can get access to that and pay shipping and handling only. We start looking at how do we communicate effectively? What's the most important piece of communication? And what people often overlook is that listening is even more important than speaking. Obviously, I like to speak. Everyone likes to speak. People like to hear their voice. But in order for me to actually make a difference, I need to be able to listen to what's being asked for out there. What are you asking for? I have to sort of gauge that when I'm answering this question, as long-winded as I'm being, that I'm answering the question you're asking, and this is what you hoped I would bring. But that can only occur if I listen acutely to what it is that you are after. So I need to listen in order to communicate, and in order to communicate effectively, I need to be close to my own authentic self. Finding your true voice is one way to do that, moving the stuff out of the way that fell in the way of who I thought I was. And the other way is like through creativity. And so that's my second book. It's called The Creative Eight, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. And in that book, we start looking at, what happens when we become a creator? What happens when we do performing arts and visual arts? It's funny how the symptoms or the discomfort tends to disappear when we're actually creating things. So I encourage people to do that for a few minutes every day. Just activate the system that is a creative system, because this is another form of communication that far exceeds the value of even speaking and listening. Singing, art, music, dancing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening. Those are the kinds of things, expressive things that can really help somebody connect with other human beings. And that's what we're really here to do ultimately on the planet. So in these last few years, I've really shifted my life into being someone who is a big super stand for communication, connection, and creativity as a source of healing. And that diagnosing and medications actually do a counterproductive damage to this whole idea of getting better. Because once we have a diagnosis, we think that we know what's wrong with us, and then we become that identity. People call that stigma, but I call it more of an identity. The idea is, if I think I have ADHD, then I should act like someone who has ADHD. Oh, there's an ADHD moment. Oh, I'm distracted. No problem, I have ADHD. Oh, I'm late for my deadline. No problem, I have ADHD. Well, maybe that's one way to look at it, but how about if we just take responsibility for the parts of our lives that isn't going as well as we thought it would, and realize that we don't have an inherent mind or deficiency, like attention deficit disorder. It's like we don't have a deficit, we don't have a disorder. We're just struggling through life like a log struggles in order, to get through the fire. And in fact, we are all burning, of course. And, that's part of the life experience as well, is that we live until we die, and then we die. And that's what happens. It's about the only thing that we know is inevitable, is that we're going to die. And, we're all so terrified of death, and that's part of the issue as well. We're very terrified of leaving the planet. It's going to hurt. We're going to hurt other people. We're going to miss people, or they're going to miss us, or are they going to miss us? All these things. So many fears are based on our fear of death. And in our communication, we get to share that with other people, and a new sign of, when we connect resonantly with another human being, isn't it true that just a massive amount of relief and peace and, even freedom and love can show up from that setting? And to me, it's very obvious that that's a much more potent approach to taking on discomfort than anything that the modern psychiatric industrial complex has put into place.
Well, you sure packed a lot in there for 25 minutes. My goodness.
Yeah. Thank you.
That was awesome. You answered all of my questions before I had a chance to ask them. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your passion. It's remarkable. It shows, how much you care, and that you are obviously practicing what you preach. And so that, too, is very much appreciated. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to possibly do a synopsis and anything else that you would like to share and what you are offering the audience. So we will be right back.
Thank you.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another. Gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
I am thoroughly enjoying this interview with Dr. Fred Moss this morning. And what he shared is, you can hear, first of all, his passion and his desire to help others. And he has bucked the system. I mean, my hat's off to you, and I thank you for sharing it and making it so clear and precise in what you have shared. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Now, going forward, well, first, another thing, I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but another thing I appreciated is your title of The Undoctor, an undiagnosing psychiatrist. I just love that line. That was awesome. Thank you. So now, what would you like to share with the audience before we close?
Well, as things have moved on, I've taken on a lot of different names. So we have the Undoctor, we have Global Madness, we have the True Voice Technology, we have Welcome to Humanity, we have, the Creative Eight, more recently, this Welcome to Humanity has really grown into its own name. So in 2016 and 17, I was looking for, what is my new brand? If I step away from conventional psychiatry, because I no longer can be the typecasted psychiatrist that they have, meaning that, I obviously am not that interested in prescribing medicines to anybody, and yet I've written over 100,000 prescriptions in my life. So how do I get that done? There's soul sacrifice involved. There's heartache involved, and it's pain, and there's a significant amount of duplicity that's right there in the centrality of the whole thing. So how do I get that done? Well, when we start looking at, let's just take a look at the word undoctor. This was a moniker that a friend of mine gave me a few years ago, after hearing me for a little while, and that is, the idea that the problem here is nothing to do with big pharma, nothing to do with insurance, nothing to do with money grubbing, nothing to do with any of that. The problem here, the way to get out of this problem is to realize, before you even come in the door, that there might be nothing wrong with you. See, if there's nothing wrong with you, then you don't need a diagnosis. And if you don't need a diagnosis, then you don't need medication. If you don't need medication, then you won't have to take something that will make you worse. To me, that seems like a really obvious little algorithm. So, but people really need to know that there's something wrong with them. And this includes me. All of us really, we want to know that they're what's wrong with me? I don't feel good. It seems like I feel different than other humans. What's wrong with me? And, it's almost universal. And along with this idea that people are looking for a human connection, another universal truth about it all is that almost everyone believes that there's something wrong with them. So it's almost like a sign of normalness to think that there's something wrong with me. Isn't that interesting that we can actually come at life in that direction with the idea that there might be nothing wrong with me, and the Undoctor really is about that. When you come to the realization that there's nothing wrong with you, then you can approach the Undoctor approach to the whole thing, which is that, undiagnosing, unmedicating, and then undoctrinating people. Basically, taking people off their diagnosis and letting them know, in this case, I know you have a diagnosis, Carol. You know what your diagnosis is? It's Carol Graham. That's it. See? That's it. That's an undeniable diagnosis you have. You've been you the whole time, and now you've acquired those things that you've acquired. You got battle scars, you got medals, you got trophies, and you're Carol Graham. That's your diagnosis. It's not the same as anyone else's diagnosis, and no one else has the Carol Graham even a different Carol Graham has a different Carol Graham diagnosis. Mm-hmm. But that's a more precise truth of what's going on here, rather than grouping you up with a bunch of other people who are scared to die too, or a bunch of other people who are nervous about failing, or a bunch of other people who don't feel confident in a crowd. That's not, so what? So what if you have that? That's just part of being human. And so when we take that on, that's when we are able to stop the show before it even starts. And that's what the Undoctor really does. On the one hand, I serve two people as the Undoctor. I serve those people who are considering coming into, or those people who think that they've already been misdiagnosed or over or underdiagnosed, and they're not happy with the outcome, and they want to change. I need to let them know that if they're going to continue to think that there's something wrong with them in the first place, this isn't going to work. You see, when you think there's something wrong with you, then you think you need a fix, and then you think you need a pill or a diagnosis. And if all I'm going to do is move away that pill and that diagnosis, and you're going to stay sure that there's something wrong with you, well, then you're going to continue to search for a fix. And you go, well, what should I take? If I'm not going to take my medicine, what should I take? So maybe nothing. Maybe just develop some cool practices in the world of gratitude, in the world of meditation, in the world of nature, in the world of creativity, in the world of spirituality, in the world of being of service, in the world of pampering yourself, in the world of, having authentic conversations, in the world of, watching your nutrition, and world of, yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong and movement. These are the kinds of things that can go a long way. Keeping yourself hydrated, making sure that you love your pets and your children, and, openly moving out of the, it has reached such a perverse point, this idea of communication, that many people are actually now saying things that even they don't believe.
Good
Carol,
point. Wow. Yes.
Carol, how bizarre is that people actually say stuff that even they don't believe? What have we come to? The mass of men, this is like Henry David Thoreau, the mass of men go through life in quiet desperation and then go to their graves with their songs still in them. Now, when you look at that phrase, you start realizing maybe the greatest tragedy of all time is to live a full life and have nobody ever know you. What a shame. What a crying shame. You see, there is a you underneath it all. You don't have to go searching out there for the real you. The real you has been here the whole time. You've just done everything you can to cover it up and smother it. Now it's time to kind of unleash that, unlatch that, move away the rust and the mud and the cobwebs and, get to that core self, that genuine self. So that when you start speaking your truth and when you start listening for other people's truth, a new level of communication pattern can be established, and that, as I've already made very clear, is where the greatest healing can take place. So yeah, that the Undoctor mixes in with the True Voice that way, which all mixes in underneath Welcome to Humanity, and the same thing with Global Madness, which was a pretty cool name for a while. This idea that we're living in a world where madness is just sort of the standard quo, the status quo of the whole thing. Like we're just, there's a level of being really just completely confused and disoriented and then calling that who we are. And so Global Madness was an effort to take a look universally, internationally at, I was going to make an Anthony Bourdain-based film, like the Anthony Bourdain of the mental health industry, and go around and speak to clinicians and speak to providers and speak to clients and patients and get what part of this is universal. What part, a diagnosis, a psychiatric diagnosis is a very culturally specific concept. So if I show up like I show up in, Sacramento, I might get a diagnosis. But if I take that same me and go transplant myself to Singapore or to Auckland or to Reykjavik or something like that, I won't have that same diagnosis. This is another special thing about psychiatric diagnosis is that it flips. It changes over time or with respect to space. See, when I have a broken arm in Sacramento and I go to Singapore, it's definitely still a broken arm.
That's right.
If I go to Reykjavik with a broken arm, I got a broken arm. If I go to Reykjavik with ADD, I might not have any kind of psychiatric condition. It's really interesting. It's not a really true condition. It's very vague. It's just a conversation. So when we start looking at that, we can start seeing that the whole thing is kind of built in smoke and mirrors. And if it's built in smoke and mirrors, what are we left with? We're left with each other. And if we're left with each other, what can we do? Well, we can communicate. And how do we communicate? We communicate by cleaning our act up and presenting ourselves as the most authentic, genuine self that we can muster. And then we listen carefully for what the other person has to say, moving ourselves out of the way, being only curious about what it is they're trying to get across. Through whatever means, conversation, art, music, dancing, singing, etc., whatever, we're there to receive and there to interact and, and interrelate. Once we do that, that's where that special kind of healing can actually occur. And that's what we're all about here.
I'm taking so many notes I can't write fast enough.
Okay.
You have shared so much, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with my audience. Is there any one sentence, mantra, whatever, that the audience can take away that will capsulize everything you said today?
I get asked this every so often on podcasts, and I usually come up with the same answer, and I think I'm going to come up with it again because it fits better today than usual, which is, really, there might be nothing wrong with you.
Wow. Awesome.
There might be nothing wrong with you.
That does capsulize. You're absolutely right. There might be nothing wrong with you.
Exactly.
Well, again, Dr. Moss, I thank you for what you shared today, and we will be promoting this. I will send you everything when it does come out, and I thank you for your time, your expertise, your challenge, and thank you again for being on Never Ever Give Up Hope.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.